Hi everyone, this is Meredith Slota, and this is my ontology design project for the Seattle band map for INFX 532. The Seattle band map began as an art project in which folks tried to connect local bands through shared musicians and other connections such as shows played together or album collaborations, etc. And this is an example of one of those maps that's centered around Nirvana, but it has all sorts of connections. And I thought that something like this would make a really great example of the power of an ontology, especially because even though I really, really love local music, I can never keep this sort of data straight in my head. And so something like this is actually really useful for me. The art project transitioned into a digital project, which is now online. I'm going to click over and show you in just a minute. But they built a database that hard codes all of these relationships behind the scenes so that you can actually click around and see how bands are connected. And they define connected through two criteria: if they share band members or if two artists have collaborated on a project, namely a project that was recorded and publicly shared at least once, or they played a public show together. So I'm going to click over to the website after I show you how they're visualizing these things. And I really love their visualization because they let you see actually how all these bands are connected, and it lists out the connections. So this is a local band called Hey Marseille, and they have 8 other bands connected. And they also have data for location and website and members, but it's not filled in. And it's also not super clear how those 8 connections actually connect with Hey Marseille. But let's go over to the website so you can see it in action. So this is Damien Gerardo, and if you click to Hey Marseille, it recenters the map, and you can again see different connections. So the content is all user generated, so it's not super complete. But again, I think that if you were, really interested in this kind of thing, you would want to see those connections more transparently and know more about the bands. So I built my ontology to model this specifically. So let's go back. And so like I said, the content on the band map is user generated. You can add new content if something is missing. They don't have every band ever yet. And so you can add connections to existing bands, or you can add a band entirely if it's missing. And so they have several ways in which you can add data. So you can either connect 2 bands together, like I said, if they're existing, and then you have to explicitly spell out in text why are they connected. And if you're adding a band, you have to add their name and their location and the website, and then a list of all their members and other band connections. And they ask for all this information because they have to actually go into their database and build a hard-coded connection between these 2 bands. And I think that if you were to use an ontology to do this sort of thing, then the relationships would sort of build dynamically as you defined the data that went into it. You wouldn't have to hard code it in. You can just sort of describe the bands, and then they would just become connected. So I set about doing that. And let's keep going. Okay, so modeling this band map. The data that they ask you for sort of gives us a good start to what people are really interested in. And so I imagine the audience of this ontology to be Seattle music fans, musicians, music archivists maybe, and just general curiosity, which is where I sort of fall, although also Seattle music fan. And the scope of it so far is bands and their associated musicians, and also the instruments that those musicians play, albums and the songs on those albums, and locations, which is Seattle so far, although I did add Portland because there's some overlap. I did not yet add shows or collaborations because I don't have good data on that yet. So I figured we would start with membership in bands, which was criteria A, and then in version 2.0 we could do criteria B. So what's in the ontology? The basic information that they ask you to enter already gives us a good example of what they would consider a class. So bands, a person, And in mine, I considered a person to be either a musician or a producer. There is some overlap there, but for the purposes of what we're talking about, I'm separating them. And the existing band map does not have albums or songs. They hard code those relationships in the back end, but I thought it would be nice to make those more transparent. And I also have instrument and location. And then I have the properties, which describe the relationships between those classes, which are largely authorship and collective membership and creative association, which you'll see on the next slide. And then the data type properties are all metadata about the items, namely websites, dates for albums, same as Wikipedia links when possible, etc. And those are all shown on my little map. So you can see the classes in all caps: location, band, album, song, instrument, and people, and then the subclasses for people. And then the associations between them. So people and bands can have locations. Bands can have producers or musicians. Bands also have albums. And albums have associated songs. And musicians have an instrument sometimes. And for this purpose, it's useful to know that I consider vocals to be an instrument. So that's in there as well. The data type properties and their associated classes. Bands and albums have websites. Bands have years formed and year disbanded. If year disbanded is empty, then they are still active. And they have a same as link, as do album and person, if they appear in Wikipedia. Although it's worth noting that many Seattle local bands are not yet considered notable enough to have Wikipedia entries, but it's there when possible. Albums also have a year released, and person has a birthday, although that is not as populated as it could be, but there's also a lot of other metadata about people that might be useful. And then songs have audio files if they are uploaded and available. So to show you my live demo and maybe add some data or just play around, I'm going to go over to Top Braid, and there it is. Okay, so this is what my ontology looks like. You can see the classes on the left, and if we click into a band, I keep asking it to show the metadata, but we'll see what it shows. Okay, there it is. So I keep asking it to add the metadata and the widgets on the side, but you can see here that Brandi Carlile is one of my favorite musicians, but her band is also called Brandi Carlile, so I added band to distinguish from Brandi Carlile, the artist. But you can see that they have have location, Seattle, Washington. They have some musicians. They have some albums that have been released. And you can get to those through one of their albums on here. So Brandi Carlile Band, click on the browser, you can see the same thing. It's all very interesting. And if you want to see bands that are connected, we can go between Misled, for example, has the artist Leslie Wood, which is also in the Redwood Plan. So you can see that here as well, and you can navigate to that either by starting from the common location, going to Misled the band, and then clicking on the musician. You can see that she's actually the musician for 3 of the bands in my set and plays a number of instruments, so those are one-to-many relationships. But she's not notable enough to have a same as. Unlike Hey Marseille, who is pretty notable, and they have Year Formed and all of these musicians, but they also have, oh shoot, I didn't add it. Okay, well this is a good example of adding a same as link. So we can go back to here, you can find the Wikipedia link. Maybe should have had this pulled up before, but we're gonna look up Hey Marseille. And we're going to add that same as link. Okay. Okay, so we're going to copy the whole thing, and we're going to head back and add that same as link there. So now that's well annotated, and they will not be confused with any other Hey Marseille. Okay, so heading back to PowerPoint. I think that that's about it for showing this, but I think that the power of this is that you can really see what the connections are, not just that bands are connected, but how they're connected. And I think that that is really, really useful. And because it's an ontology, it can also be visualized in the same way as their existing visualization with just a little bit of added code. So I think it'd be a really neat project to work on. And if you were going to do this in the future, you could add more metadata about the bands and songs, specifically lyrics. I wanted to add lyrics, but had some trouble getting the text to format in a sensical way instead of just collapsing into a giant block of text. And of course, adding collaborations where maybe more than one band is on the same album, or adding the shows that they played together. So I think there's a lot of potential here, and it was really fun to work on, and I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.